1, 2, 3, 4.
There's a real richness of the culture in Florida.
We got swamp cabbage cooking here. This is sort of a South Florida delicacy.
Welcome to the Florida Folk Show podcast. I'm Pete Gallagher. I'm opening up my files, my vast collection of tapes and photographs and videos and artifacts from a life of traveling the byways and throughways of Florida as a writer, putting them in this new format. I thought would be very cool, and we're going to have fun with this. Now, our first show, this is show number 1. It's going to feature Irene Russell telling a story about her daddy making moonshine. Stetson Kennedy, this is just an unbelievable interview, and he talks about Woody Guthrie. And then the feature of the whole feature is Tom Gaskins, the Swamp Knee King from Palmdale out in the middle of Florida, and what he thinks about the world. So sit back and listen and have a great Florida day. Well, I'd like to introduce you to Irene Russell, a member of the Russell family that's been in Florida for 7 or 8 generations. These are real Floridians, and she grew up as a little girl and without electricity. And she grew up getting up every morning and chasing the chickens down and picking up the eggs and living that kind of a life outside of Williston, Florida. And she's got a cool story, uniquely Florida story about the day that her father had a visit from the sheriff. And this is Irene Russell Green. This was recorded, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago in Crystal River, where she's living today.
Sometimes it ain't so bad, sometimes it ain't so good. I takes it all in stride, cause my living's in the woods. Ain't got much crime or violence, we never had no drugs. But the moon comes through the pines in mason jars and gallon jugs.
Yeah, good old moonshine. You know, times was very hard, and Daddy didn't make much money on his crops. And you know, the meat that we killed, was really for our own use. So he would start making him a little bit of moonshine. And he had a lot of customers. I mean, they knew he made good moonshine, and they would come around. He'd sell them a jug of moonshine. Well, this one particular day, here comes the high sheriff driving down the road, kicking up dust. And Daddy meets him out front, shaking his hands, patting him on the back, good buddies. And the guy said, well, I sure would like to have one of your smoked hams. And my dad said, yeah, you can have one. And he says, well, let me go out to the smokehouse and pig it out. Well, my daddy had to think twice, because that's where he had his moonshine stored. He said, oh no, Sheriff, you can't do that. I got some bad dogs back there and they will eat you up. And the sheriff said, oh, and them dogs won't bother me. I'm used to it. And Dad said, oh no, you just stay right here. And he said, I'll go get you ham. And so he stayed on the porch, and Daddy, he ran to the smokehouse. In the meantime, he rounded up some of our dogs and chased them out front where they'd be barking at the sheriff. And Daddy pulled down the biggest ham he had and gave it to the sheriff. And the sheriff got it and drove off. And after that, Daddy said, well, that's the last time he'd store moonshine in the smokehouse.
Well, next up, the late Stetson Kennedy is featured. One day in 2010, a group of us, me, my childhood buddies Jack Piccolo and Joe Smith from Rockledge, and now of course Jacksonville, and Ed Lehman from WMNF in Tampa, and we went up to visit Stetson Kennedy, and for the purpose of getting an interview with him about Woody Guthrie, because Woody Guthrie stayed with Stetson in his classic Florida house outside St. Augustine in a town called Switzerland, Florida, in a place that he named Beluthahatchee. And he maintained a Woody Guthrie room. We were so proud to be able to sleep in that room. We hung out there, drinking whiskey and playing our guitars and thinking about Woody. And this is that interview. And Stetson Kennedy, for those that don't know, is one of Florida's greatest authors. And he's remembered for having infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan in the 1940s. And he exposed its secrets to authorities in the outside world. He wrote books, Jim Crow Guide to the United States. He wrote Palmetto Country. He wrote Southern Exposure. He passed on a couple years back, but he's, of course, in the Florida Hall of Fame, right up there with Ernest Hemingway and all the other great writers from Florida. Stetson Kennedy. What is the deal with his guitar? He on his guitar, Woody's guitar, he had written the words, "This machine kills fascists."
That's correct. And there's a story, thereby hangs the tale. My next door neighbor, I was living in one place, and my neighbor in the house next door, we built our houses at the same time. An old classmate of mine, an attorney. And every time Woody would show up at Beluthahatchee, these helicopters, surveillance, would spend the days. The story was they're probably still looking for German subs. Just to burn gas. But anyway, it turned out when I got my FBI reports that they were concerned about Woody Guthrie being here. And so one day a couple of FBI agents went to my lawyer friend's office and asked about Woody. And finally, my friend Gerald Hart, Gerald said, "Well, do you know of any disloyal act that Woody ever committed?" And one of the guys reaches into his briefcase and pulls out an 8x10 of Woody with that guitar saying, "This machine kills fascists." And that was the answer to the question: Has he committed any disloyal act? And of course, the politics of America was such at that time, we were so illiterate, we didn't know one thing from another, still don't. But that's where the FBI was coming from back then.
Why would he single out fascists? What did fascists mean to Woody?
To Woody, well, we were in World War II, and that's what it was all supposed to be about. And the Americans who were doing the killing and dying didn't have that much information about, what they were like. Seemingly all wars, they don't much give a damn why they're killing. But
why was he saying this guitar, this machine kills fascists? Was he talking about his music?
The
freedom
of... to this extent. Somewhere in my files, I have a very rare item about an 8-page brochure entitled "Fascism," published by the United States Army Educational Branch or something. And the thing had no longer, it hadn't cooled off from the press before Congress got hold of it. And there's stuff in there about fascism and being an advanced capitalist, imperialist, strong arm of capitalism or something. Anyway, Congress didn't like it, so they recalled it. But I've still got a copy. I don't know how many more copies survive. But Woody was very much into anti-fascism. there's a London magazine, sort of a replica of, you may know about Southern Exposure magazine,
Yeah.
published up at Chapel Hill. They took the name from my book, Southern Exposure, you know.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, the Brits made a publishing one similar. Same idea, same inspiration. Anti-fascist, anti-racist. So they invited me to write an article about Woody. And so the title of my article is Woody Guthrie, Natural Born Anti-Fascist.
Natural Born Anti-Fascist.
Yeah, that's the title.
Do you have that essay somewhere?
Yes.
Oh, I'd like to see that. That'd be great.
So that's Woody and anti-fascism.
Was Woody a violent person, a peaceful person? Would he have been an advocate for peace?
Woody?
Woody, yeah. I mean,
Well,
the real Woody Guthrie that you saw hanging out here.
Woody is one of his. Joe Klein in his biography said when he didn't really know Woody, he said he always thought of him as a little guy, a stand-up comic or something, and. Of course, Woody was a whole lot more than that. And the subject of peace, I remember he said that if we just take all the profit out of war, there wouldn't be any. Just as simple as that. And I think he was right. It's another example of Woody one-liners. He said. It's your world. Take it easy, but take it.
It's your world.
It's your world. Take it easy, but take it. So that's his formula for people power and what we need to be doing.
Why do you think? Tell us what you think about Woody. Why he would scrawl those words on his guitar, "This machine kills fascists." And he had that guitar right down here, didn't he? He had that guitar right here.
Do I have it? No.
No, I mean but Woody had it here when he was here. Yeah.
He always had his guitar, of course. And he and Ramblin' Jack would sit around the campfire and play into the night. Woody is a very, the ultimate political animal. Somebody said Americans are the most politically illiterate industrial people on the face of the earth. And Woody, of course, was the big exception to that. He was 200% political. Everything he said and did, thought. I don't know. Like I say, we're talking about World War II, which is supposed to be against fascism and Nazism, and some of us were aware of that fact. And Woody, above all, I remember he wrote somewhere about Marjorie. He was not in service at that point, but he saw an ad or something for dishwashers wanted on a Liberty ship. And he says, woman a-crying, me a-flying, out the door and down the line. He went down and signed up as a dishwasher on a Liberty ship. So ships all around him being torpedoed, and he wrote all these songs about it. Cisco was with him. And the story was, I believe Woody was on a ship that was torpedoed, and Woody grabbed his guitar down in the hole. And while everybody's getting up that gangway and getting up on deck, he was there playing the guitar. That's anti-fascism, trying to keep the crew alive.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I'd not heard that story before about Woody playing the guitar during the middle of an attack, a torpedo attack.
I forget where I get it, but it's in my brain somewhere. Yeah.
This machine kills fascists.
Yes. And the British public likes that too, you know. They're still talking fascism. You never hear the word here. It's one of those, things that have been, it's an Orwellian state-of-the-art thing that it's a taboo word because you don't want anybody to know or think about such things.
All right. Tom Gaskins was the quintessential Florida Cracker. I thought that the minute I met him, and I thought that every second I was with him. He spent most of his life trudging through the swamps of Fish Eating Creek near Palmdale, Florida. He was a man of ideas, a salt of the earth character if I've ever seen one. Man, he owned the Cypress Knee Museum in Palmdale, and he didn't have to worry about finding it because he had strewn tall trees with branches that spelled out directions and funny comments north and south of his place, and so you couldn't miss it. And he was on both sides of the highway. He had a trail that went way out in the swamp, come back. It was only as wide as a 2x4, so it was more dangerous than walking through the swamp when you were on that thing. But he had a collection of cypress knees, and he would look at them, and he would see things that no one would in the right mind would see. But if he told you what he saw, then all of a sudden it just came out at you. You know, that's Joseph Stalin. That's a ballerina's foot. That's a lady hippo in a Carmen Miranda hat. And suddenly there it was right before you. And he had a whole museum of these needs that he found in his lifetime of trudging through the swamp. He was a genius. He had more than a dozen patents for all kinds of things, especially making cypress knee products, which is a huge industry still in Florida to this day. And I spent 4 or 5 different quality days with him. In fact, I took him, my friend Charlie Cook and I took him with us on a swamp camp on Walt Disney World's property. Back when Charlie worked with the Walt Disney Company, and Tom regaled everybody. We went way out in the woods, and Disney had put tents out there, and he showed us how to make swamp cabbage, and it was crazy. But he's most famous today, I guess, for the Tom Gaskins turkey call, and it's still manufactured and sold today. I'm proud that I have one that he gave me way back when, but they still look the same. But that thing is so powerful, according to Tom, that hunters have been shot by other hunters that hear that turkey call thinking it's a real turkey, and they just fire into the woods there. So anyway, great Floridian. I hope you enjoy this segment. Here's Tom Gaskins. Beauty to Tom Gaskins is the conical cypress knee rising from black swamp water, crabbed with knots and cankers. Beauty to this man of the swamp is the everyday chopped off dirt clogged pine stump bulldozed from the earth to decay and root rot rigor mortis. The man sees not only beauty but truth, he says, in a gnarled piece of discarded deadwood smeared gray by the elements and scummed with webs and insects. Beautiful, says Tom Gaskins when he describes such items. Fascinating.
Ain't that something?
His is a gifted eye.
If you're fixed on seeing one thing, you can't see nothing else. So I try to see it all, or just be ready to see anything. That's what I try to do.
And cypress knees seem to lurk about him everywhere. He can show you one knee that resembles a dancing hippopotamus wearing a Carmen Miranda hat. As for Florida's unofficial state tree, the bulldozed pine stump, the last one Gaskins hauled in was turned upside down, brushed with a broom, sprayed with water, and sold for $1,200 to a restaurateur looking for a conversation piece. The first impulse is to discount the shape.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Now, for instance, there's a piece of wood that was out back here that was just a dead cypress oak tree, and I cut wood off of it almost to a dangerous point, and then all of a sudden I looked and I said, my God, there's a table there, all one piece of wood, and I sold it. I leveled it and everything and sold it for $800.
If he is nearby, Gaskin's face will break out with the sort of grin only Cheshire cats and red-handed Florida crackers can manage. "Take a close look at that," the old man will order in a razor-sharp voice honed with childish incredulity. "Look closely." The wood immediately melts into the imagination. Well, look at that. Nature's gnarls and twists have fashioned a wondrous ghostly galleon. Like the surprise illusions in a Dali painting, the wood is a great tall ship with sails ripped and pummeled by a terrific wind floating on a gray sea. No Abe Lincoln cloud formation could match this. Gaskin has been offered hundreds of dollars for that piece of old wood. "I won't sell it," he smiles. "A guy had it in his hands and was just about to toss it on a fire. Something flashed across my mind and I screamed at him to stop." Gaskins has never taken a knife to the piece or altered it in any way. For the past 51 years, Tom Gaskins has displayed nature's artwork at a peculiar emporium of Floridana known as the Tom Gaskins Cypress Knee Factory and Museum. It's located at the point where US 27 crosses Fish-Eating Creek in rural Glades County, but driving anywhere west of Lake Okeechobee, it's hard to miss Gaskin's zany cypress tree billboards with enticing come-ons such as, "If he won't stop, lady, hit him on head with shoe." A spry, balding cypress knob of a man who wears shoes only to funerals, Gaskins is as bohemian as his great collection of mysterious woodstuffs. He is the quintessential Florida swamp cracker, and he means to stay that way.
73 years old, I'm supposed to be getting ready to kick the bucket. I did 75 push-ups this morning and run 4 miles.
Gaskins cleans out his digestive system and heals various aches and pains with a creosote recipe that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has declared highly carcinogenic in a personal letter to him. He has eaten and later retrieved the same slab of black coal tar for years, keeping it wrapped in tinfoil in a back pocket when it's not passing through his intestines. Each day, Gaskins passionately licks the wood cell fibers on freshly peeled cypress knees and dines almost exclusively on swamp cabbage and sorry meat, well-done beef and ham strips cooked sideways by burning Florida cabbage palm fronds. He washes this all down with a few sips of what he calls gook water. It is a watery creosote runoff that once put him in the hospital near death. I drank a quart of it to see if it would heal a stone bruise on my foot. I overdosed, but I learned my lesson, he says. It only makes common sense. A sip of whiskey will do one thing for you. A whole quart will do something altogether different. Gaskins describes himself as stingy.
I'm cheap. My wife cuts my hair. I go barefooted. I don't spend money on foolishness. I drink a little whiskey.
Despite this, the swamp man has contributed thousands of dollars to the campaigns of conservative politicians. His love of nature is approached only by a fondness for ultra-right-wing politics. He markets the John Birch Society Blue Book in his gift shop, declares himself a selfish reactionary, and does not hide his disgust for government handouts or intervention.
Different people spend money different ways, and I'm stingy in lots of ways. So I sent a lot of money to the right wing. I sent over $3,000, $3,535 to the conservative political action committees and to different conservatives to helping out Reagan and helping Reagan get in, and that's a lot of money. And I might be a little foolish.
Why do you take such an interest in that?
I think that you bet on a horse you think is right, you'll do that. And I think that I think that the conservative side has got sense. It jibes, it makes sense, and that if the other side was to win over, well, then I can't operate. I'm out. Because the conservative side is a winner. The other side, there's no use to try to be anything if they're going to take it away from you.
But you've already got your thing here.
No, but they'll take it away. They'll take it away. I mean, the income tax thing is I can't make anything. The only reason why I am able to live as well as I do is my business is my pleasure. And the things that I love to do, I do not have to pay a tax on. And I get by on less money than other people do.
Though he has lived his entire life in the Florida cypress swamps, Gaskins sports an expertise in a number of unlikely areas.
I've got 10 patents, and I've got so many in my head that it's pitiful. They're not nutty things. They work. And whereas some are worth more than others, I can show you. I can show you 10 patents, and some of them are a little. I got them in the file out at the shop. If you want to look at them.
Among his inventions are a helicopter, drill bit, boat motor, saw, tire pressure gauge, and grass cutter. They all work, he notes with pride. Gaskins is also one of the nation's foremost experts on hunting turkeys. He has published 3 books on the subject and, since 1947, has manufactured and sold what he claims is the finest turkey call ever made.
His turkey call is probably the greatest one going.
It is. It is.
Gaskins claims 6 of his friends have been shot by other hunters while using the Gaskins call, and that the strange gobbling noises have also called up elk, moose, bear, and deer for lucky hunters. He and his turkey call have been featured many times in such magazines as Field and Stream and American Hunter. Ideas and experiments bounce about this man's head like constantly recoiling springs. He has made videotaped records of his projects and plans to someday write the definitive book on the Florida swamp. I've got so many other things floating around in my head. If I ever get my ducks in a row, you'll see some amazing inventions, he says. People laugh at me, but I'm used to it. They said I was crazy when I took out my first patent, and look what happened. That was in 1937. The patent was for articles manufactured from cypress knees, those mysterious root bumps that poke above the land and water surfaces near most, but not all, bald cypress trees. The idea was born when his mother-in-law mentioned one day that she'd like to make a flower vase out of a cypress knee. Something clicked in my head. I'm a salesman, see? I believe anything can be sold. I turned to my wife and said, that's something else that will sell. But it wasn't as easy as you think. I figured, like everyone else in the world, including encyclopedias and Webster's Dictionary, that cypress knees were hollow. They aren't. While lying in bed one night, Gaskins says he devised a method for cutting, boiling, peeling, and gouging out a dry hole inside the normally solid knees. That Gaskins cavity is what gives the commercial cypress knee its texture and preservation. It was the beginning of the cypress products industry, a phenomenon that still decorates Florida roadsides. At one time, Gaskins shipped his lamps, clocks, vases, birdhouses, tables, furniture, book holders, wall plaques, and decorative knees across the United States. With the help of son Tom Jr., he still maintains a tiny factory to service roadside customers and exclusive accounts. Gaskins moved from his hometown of Arcadia to his present location in Palmdale in the mid-30s, on land provided for him free by the Likes Brothers Company, smack on the edge of a wild fish-eating creek.
In this area right here, I moved here. Now that's an interesting story. Before thinking about this place, I was invited to move to Collier County. A man named Edmund Scott was Collier's right-hand man and was clerk of court there, or county clerk or something like that, for big man down there for years and years, and he's an old Arcadia boy, and he saw my knees in St. Petersburg, probably in the garden cafeteria or somewhere there. And he came by and he says, Tom, they were just opening up Collier County then, he says, come down and do your cypress knees down here at Deep Lake, and we'll give you a house, lights, water, and all the knees you want, maybe money to develop. And I went down and looked it over, and at that time there was not four-wheel drive, And that country down there is different from this country. At that time, it wasn't drained dry like it is now. And to go a mile north, east, south, and west would anywhere would be a job. So I says, And then I knew this Fishing Creek territory. There was a dirt road up and down both sides of it, and it was strung out. Fishing Creek was strung out, and I could ride the road up to this head or that head or the other place and walk in and get knees and be back out on the high ground. And anyway, that's how come to move here. And went to see, you know, this like story.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Well, that's a good story. I found out then that they had just started buying in down here.
This was in
the 30s.
30s, yeah.
And I found out that Likes had owned where I wanted to go, so I went to see him, and I said, "I want to buy some land." He said, "We don't want to sell." So I said, "Well, I want to lease some land now." I told him what I want to do. I want to go into Cypress Knee business. He says, "We don't want to lease." I says, "Well, then I want to rent some land." He says, "We don't want to rent." I says, "Well," it says, HT, I think was the man, and I was talking to two of them, HT and Tom. He says, "Tell you what we'll do. Just write us a letter saying you'll leave anytime you want to. We want you to. You can just go down and stay as long as you want to." Well, I thought that one over, and I talked to all the old-timers in Arcadia that knew all the old-timers in Tampa and so on, and every one of them says, "Well, as long as they're alive," well, I says, "you won't have no trouble." So I didn't then know what Cypress Knees were going to be, you know, so I says, "Well, what's the difference?" So I just took them up on it, and I've been like that ever since. Been right here. I've mailed them checks right out of a clear. They never asked me for a nickel. I've mailed them checks for $5,000. I'm going to mail them some more. I'm going to shock them one of these days.
It was exactly what I was looking for, a beautiful swamp, he says. I had 1,000,000 cypress knees in my backyard. It was a perfect laboratory for me to work out of. But ever since he moved to Palmdale in the mid-30s, much of his time has been spent fighting the government and damned old progress. First, the feds four-laned the highway right through the middle of his swamp. Then Lady Bird Johnson's agents gave him pure hell about his billboards. Then they started draining the swamp and growing orange groves, shopping centers, and residential homes all over the place. Quote, "At one time, this was all mine," he laments, swinging his arm in a wide swath that suggests where his wilderness once lay. Now it belongs to hell. I call Tom Gaskins a sage because he sees things others don't. Walking through his backyard one day, he spied a cypress knee that looked just like Hitler, Stalin, and FDR, all at the same time. That knee was displayed at the 1939 World's Fair, was leased for a dozen years by Robert Ripley, and is now in the museum.
It was probably 39 that I went to see Ripley's Auditorium. And at that time, I let him have two knees. One that loaned it to him, one that looked like a hand, and one that looked like Roosevelt. And I loaned them to him with the proviso that they were mine. I could get them back when I wanted them. And then later, when I put up my museum in '51, then I wrote him and got those knees back. And I have those knees now in my museum across the road. Would you want to hear another story?
Yeah.
This will knock your eyes out. Related to this, I wrote Ripley in a cypress knee, made it grow in there, and I sent it to him at the auditorium. And then they says, I says, "Now I'll fix one up for each one of your places if you tell me how many they are." And they wrote back and said 5. So I was busy for years and years, and I didn't get around to it. Just neglect. So finally, I did, and I fixed up 5 of them with Ripley growing in there, And I wrote Ripley, and they wrote back and says, thanks, but we've got all of that, such as that we need, or words to that effect. And that just floored the hell out of me. I couldn't figure it, but then I went on about my business and said, well, that's the end of that. So I've got some of them right here right now. So then one day, right out of a clear blue sky, there come a young fella through the museum up here, come back, started talking to me, and it turns out he was an investigator, a private investigator. And he says, he asked me a lot of questions about the carving in the knees up there. And he had seen a knee in Ripley's place in Canada that had Ripley grown in it, and they claimed it was a natural phenomenon. Beginning to see the light now.
Yeah.
They claim it was a natural phenomenon.
So they didn't want more than one of them around.
That's right. Well, now, what I think happened was, I think Ripley died, and these people that took it over, now this I'm just thinking, they saw that and they didn't know the story. And being smart, crooked kind of people, why they just stuck their neck out and got the head chopped off.
All of a sudden, one day, in the mail comes 5 more.
Right. Only I wrote them first, see, and then I got that letter. Now I've got all their letters. And so this private investigator, he comes to see me. And and then later on, I dig up, and I've got correspondence. All the correspondence between Ripley and me on that. And I sent these people copies of the correspondence. I sent Ripley, the people that have Ripley now, I sent them correspondence. Now, I just thought that'd be a good story.
Did they ever respond back? Or?
No, they ain't said nothing. They ain't opened their mouth.
Really?
But they made a print. They printed something somewhere, some book, and I don't have all this on my mind real good. I got too many other things to think about. But I've got the name of the private investigator, and he is quite a guy, and his daddy is quite a guy, and they come by here.
His museum was officially opened in 1951. Then, as now, the admission was $1.
You haven't changed your price.
No. Stupid, ain't it? I don't know. You see, we don't.
Everybody else has gone way up.
I know it.
God.
We've stayed at $1. But
when did it start as $1? When it opened?
Yes, sir.
Was that like a reasonable price for the time? Was
yes.
that high, or that was what everybody was charging?
It was all right. It was low. It was low.
Even then, that was low.
It was low. Yeah. But I looked at it this way. We did not have any animals to feed, and we got no high price talent to pay off. We've got our thing is in a way aesthetic, and we have capitalized on leaving it like it was. And if a tree falls or something goes wrong, why, that's the way it is. Let her rip. Except we fix if the catwalk goes bad, we fix that.
Hundreds of Gaskins' eccentric objects are displayed for tourists in a haphazard conglomeration. There are gigantic cypress knees taller than a man, a turpentine pine tree, the legendary stump where hunters used to meet in the big cypress, and above all, cypress knee museum pieces that nature has carved and Gaskins has given apt title to, no matter how strange. There is a knee that looks like an atomic bomb blast, one that resembles Flipper the dolphin, one titled Bona Lisa, ballet dancer feet, several presidents, and a few that look like Gaskins himself. The latest edition of Roadside America lists his little empire as one of the 7 wonders of America's roadsides. Across the highway, behind the woodpiles and knee stacks littered about the cypress factory, a wondrous 3/4-mile catwalk disappears into the fish-eating creek swamp. A skinny, 2-plank walkway, not built for high heels. It was erected in the early 50s. Through 3 classic Florida plant communities, an oak and cabbage hammock, a cypress swamp, and a bayhead. Undoubtedly, it is the finest swamp walk in the state, as close to a pristine Florida swamp experience as one can get without getting too wet. But the side effects of progress are now threatening to curtail the trail, which took Gaskins and his friends 7 years to build. The old man is currently haggling with the Hartford Insurance Company, which wants him to either put up railings or close it to the public. A recent injury on the catwalk, which Gaskins claims was faked, has brought the issue to a head in court action. Gaskins had to get a lawyer to defend his swamp. There was a time, Tom Gaskins tells me, that when a man stubbed his toe, it was the fault of the man who stubbed the toe, and therein a lesson should be learned. But now, roars the sage of Florida's cypress swamps, if a man stubs his toe, it is not his fault. It is the fault of the person who had the bump in his backyard, and the person with the toe can sue the person with the bump for $1 million. Now, Tom Gaskins is an undisputed authority on stub toes and backyard bumps. For the past half-century, he's been running barefoot through a vast backyard filled with still dark waters, knobby-backed alligators, and deformed conical protuberances known as cypress knees. And since the early 50s, when Gaskins finished clearing a thin pathway through a mile of fish-eating creek swamp, he estimates over 500,000 visitors have also wandered through his backyard, circumventing the trees and dodging the knees with nary a bump, bruise, or water moccasin bite. But the other day, an overweight woman fell. Gaskins says she dove off his catwalk and hurt herself in a mysterious way. I asked her what was wrong. I kept asking her, "Woman, where do you hurt?" He remembers. But she just stood there and wouldn't talk to me. For the life of me, I couldn't see a damn thing wrong with the person. Next thing Gaskins knew, however, the woman was having nightmares, could no longer service her husband, and wanted to see him in court, with shoes on. Gaskins was horrified to find lawyers, insurance men, smart fellows who can't drive a nail inspecting his swamp. To make a long story short, there was a settlement, and the swamp was declared unsafe for any feet. Gaskins was warned to put railings on the swamp, or else some other, quote, swamp diver might take him for everything he's got, including the cypress knee that looks like a hippopotamus wearing a Carmen Miranda hat. So Gaskins had to shut down the finest nature trail this side of Everglades National Park, at least until he can figure this one out. Boy, oh boy, now I got to have insurance on the swamp. Gaskins shook his bald head so hard that the dead mosquitoes slid off. What is happening to this world? He points a forefinger. You see that maple tree? That's a New York maple. What the hell is it doing in a Florida cypress swamp? There are oaks in here, too. Hundreds of them. And cabbage palms. They're not supposed to be here. They weren't here 25 years ago. What the hell is going on? You want to know? It's obvious. The water table has dropped. Man in his ditches.
And I know nothing is going to stay the same. Look at the whole goddamn world as far as that goes. Look at this atomic thing. And so I liked it better like it was, but there ain't nothing I can do about it. So if there ain't nothing I can do about it, then I accept it. I make the best of it.
Right.
You don't hear me bitching. I cry. I used to catch fish here. I own a little 40-acre place in Arcadia. You go down Road 31, and where you cross Josh's Creek, you'll see almost the only little wild place that's untouched. I own that. It's been in our family since 1912. And there's not a ditch on it. Not a ditch on it. And there used to be a pond there, and the pond's gone. And there used to be a fishing hole there, and the fishing hole's gone. Now, you've not heard me cry about that. I mean, it's too bad, but there ain't nothing I can do about it.
You know, you know that there's a lot of people that do resent it. When they start turning on their taps and salt water comes out, you know.
Oh, yes.
You know.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, they got a right to.
Mm-hmm.
But I am this way. I'll accept, I say, now if it comes to me, I'll resent it, sure. But I say, well, okay, that's the way it is. I'll sell the salt. I'll go in the salt business.
More than anything else, Tom Gaskins is a salesman, and he knows his product better than any man alive. Come hell or high water, he will survive to his dying day on the enigmatic edge of a Florida roadside cypress swamp. Who better to officiate at the requiem to a Florida that has almost disappeared? And who better to celebrate a sad, mysterious world that most of us will never, ever really know? This Florida Folk Show podcast was produced by Pete Gallagher and Tim Valley. It was edited and engineered by Tim Valley. Florida Cracker Irene Russell Green was recorded by her daughter Kelly for a series on the WMNF Florida Folk Show at her home in Crystal River. Florida author and civil rights champion Stetson Kennedy was interviewed by Pete Gallagher, Ed Lehman, Jack Piccolo, and Joe Smith, and filmed and recorded by Gary Harrell at Stetson's historic home, Beluthahatchee, west of St. Augustine. Florida Cypress Knee King Tom Gaskins was interviewed by Pete Gallagher at his Cypress Knee Museum in Palmdale and digitized for use in this program by Diane Erickson. The segment combined news feature articles written by Gallagher about Gaskins, published in the St. Petersburg Times. Thanks for listening to the Florida Folk Show podcast, and have a great Florida day.
To find out more about the Florida Folk Show podcast, go to floridafolkshow.com. You can also find us at anchor.fm/Florida Folk Show. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Florida Folk Show podcast channel on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can find all of those links and much more at floridafolkshow.com.
Tom Gaskins saw fish eating creek in 1933. Clear water, giant gar, and a million cypress knees. Faces on the tree barks, tall ships in dead pine roots. Knees that look like ballet feet, and a man in a business suit. He'd toss you a chunk of swamp wood. Say, what do you think about that? Well, that's a wood hippopotamus with a Carmen Miranda hat. Every day for 60 years he stood o'er this domain, cussing at developers and the folks who came from Maine. His eyes were always searching for that divine special need that looked like Charlton Heston spread part the old Red Sea. He put the rest in a museum, charged $1 to get in, $1 in 1951, and $1 at the end. Oh Lord, promise me I could live in the swamp and you let me be. I search every tree in my backyard for a cypress knee that looks like that. Tom Gaskins was his name, cypress knees was his game. Living life in a Florida swamp, the gators, mosquitoes, and Tom. School kids from Miami and writers like Hemingway, they all stopped in to visit Tom every single day. His turkey calls were so darn good, hunters had been shot imitating gobblers the way Tom Gaskins caught. His rustic signs told motorists exactly what to do. If he won't stop, lady, hit him on the head with shoe. He saw beauty in the wetlands, rapture in a butterfly, glory in a hoot owl, or the red-tail's lonesome cry. By day he lived on fiber from new-peeled cypress wood. At night it was swamp cabbage every chance he could. His lust was the gator's beller, the wildcat's far-off scream, the silent gurgling mystery of the swamp's black water stream. Food and Drug Administration sent Tom a personal note: quit drinking creosote water before it makes you crow. Lady Bird Johnson tried to take away his homemade signs. Revenuers hid behind his knees to catch him making shine. Tom told them all to go to hell. He had not a single care about lawyers, signs, or money. Living went there. One day a big fat lady fell. Tom said she jumped off his old boardwalk, could not service her husband, said the lawyer's courtroom talk. They shut down his swamp trail, dust covered all his knees, stage 4-lane highway, and polluted up the breeze. And somewhere in the Everglades they began to drain the land. It dropped the water table, and suddenly New York maples were growing in the sand. Oh Lord, promise me I could live in the swamp and you let me be. I search every tree in my backyard for a cypress knee that looks like God. Melaleuca's in the garden, there's a holy water drought. Tom Gaskins kicked the door in as he was checking out. This world is just a lousy place when a guy like Tom needs liability insurance on a Florida cypress swamp. Old Tommy died and never found that knee he promised God. Truth is, God was everywhere, all over Tom's backyard. Oh Lord, promise me I could live in the swamp and you let me be. I search every tree in my backyard for a cypress knee that looks like God. Tom Gaskins was his name, cypress knees was his game. Living life in a Florida swamp, the gators, the skeeters, and Tom. Yeah, the gators, the skeeters, and Tom. Oh yeah, the gators, the skeeters, and Tom.